Welcome everyone to the Girls in Movement podcast, which features startup stories, journeys from founders and influencers, and an all-round half an hour of insightful conversation with our guests, of course. My background, as you may or may not know, is the startup world, and my guest today is certainly no different. She's been involved in 7 startups prior to her current project, if I've got that right, and I'm definitely keen to find out more about those. If you don't know as well, Girls in Movement is looking to kind of mentor young individuals across the world and empower them when it comes to starting an idea. And I think our guest today has had a kind of extraordinary journey when it comes to mentoring. So I suppose let's give a warm welcome to Manjit, the founder of Binti. Welcome, Manjit. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Polly. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. I mean, I was looking at kind of what you guys are doing at Binti and your story itself, and it's really insightful. I'm excited to kind of let everyone, the listeners, understand how you got the idea of Binti and what's kind of coming up as well. It's a great initiative. So I think from your side, it'd be great as the first question would be if you could tell our audience about Binti, where the idea came from, really.
Well, I used to work as a mentor for the Cherie Blair Foundation about 5 years ago, and I was working with a young lady in Nairobi who needed some help with increasing the revenue of her business.
Sure.
And we used to speak every week on Skype on a Saturday, and despite the miles, our lives seemed quite similar.
Right.
And then until one day when she said, "Manjit, do you know that women in Africa don't have access to sanitary pads?"
Right.
And at the time I was quite shocked. I said, "Well, what do you mean? What do they use then?" She said, "Well, they use animal skin, cow dung, leaves,
Oh my God.
sometimes whole newspaper, cotton wool, anything to stem the flow." And I guess now in hindsight, I know that the reason why I was so shocked and angry and was because I've worked in a very male-dominated space all my life.
Yeah.
If I didn't have access to a sanitary pad, then there's no way I would have done any of the things that I had in my life, and that's kind of what pushed me to start doing some research and really exploring what was happening out there.
Wow, amazing. And was it something that went so kind of course when you kind of start a startup or start a project, you're always kind of doing initial sort of research. I mean, was there projects like Binti out there? Was there anything in Africa kind of doing something like this or?
I think the best answer to that question is 1 in 10 people in the world still don't have access to clean water, despite the fact that we've had organizations working for decades to try and rectify the situation.
Yeah, exactly.
So in India, for example, only 12% of women have access to sanitary pads. So there are other companies out there that are trying to make changes, but if we only reach 1% of the total population of India, we'll have made a massive impact.
And where's your sort of focus in terms of kind of countries that you help? Is it India, Africa, or is it a combination?
It's a combination. To be honest, we started, although my first country that I visited was Nairobi.
Sure.
I went to India, and then when I discovered how big an issue it was there, we started doing a lot of research and developing our education program there. But then, of course, by the time that work had started, exploring what was going on at home in the UK, we realized that, well, actually, homeless women, for example, don't have access to sanitary products, or women in domestic violence shelters. You know, when a woman is trying to run away from a situation like that, the last thing she's going to remember to pack is our sanitary product. So when you start thinking about availability and access, you realize that actually, hang on, there's a lot of women out there that wouldn't have products with them. So, for example, if there's a war in a country and women are running away, they still bleed. And unfortunately, we do drop food and we do drop water to them. but often we forget that they need sanitary products.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something which is overlooked. And I think, just to touch back on the point, I think education is also such a big kind of issue, especially in countries like, say, India and Africa, educating people around this topic, so there's not as much of a stigma put around the topic itself. I mean, when you kind of, what's the sort of typical engagement when you reach out to, do you tend to reach out to schools, or is it villages? How does it work?
Usually with schools, of course, if we've set up a project in a location, then we'll go back there and work in the community as well.
Sure.
But generally, if you ask a girl in India what's a period, the only thing that she knows is that it's dirty. She doesn't know where the blood comes from, why she bleeds, or how to take care of herself. So our education program is designed to tackle 4 areas. And the first one, of course, is the biology of the cycle.
Yeah.
The second one, I think this is what I've learned just through my own experience and journey through Binti, is that if I knew where I was in my cycle, or if I knew that I should eat certain foods or diet during the month, then my life wouldn't be so hectic every month emotionally within the cycle. So we cover the emotional side. We explore the cultural side, because there's so many different taboos across the country, from not going to the temple, not touching certain foods, not being able to sit in the family home, or having to change bed sheets and sleep on the floor, things like that. We look and talk in an interactive fashion, so that we can really dig deep into the stigma and the taboo that is associated to the girls in a particular village.
Wow. Wow.
And then the fourth one, from a spiritual standpoint, is really getting the girls to understand that they can do anything that the boys can,
Yeah,
and that they can dream big and stay in school, so that we can kind of cut this cycle of dropping out of school because they don't have access to sanitary products, and then getting married off really young, and just kind of perpetuating the cycle again and again.
Yeah, it's really good, because it's obviously, I mean, the more that you're telling me, it's not just about kind of periods and the cycle itself, but it's actually looking more into socially what else they're dealing with as well, and it's just kind of an element of their life, and you're touching on different kind of elements which can, I suppose, like you say, if they want to, we want them to stay in school, and that's something you're helping with, which is huge. So it's amazing. I mean, obviously, I can imagine it's not just yourself doing this. I mean, how does the team work? Do you have kind of full-time team, or is it volunteers?
They're all volunteers right now. We've been running for about 3.5 years. We've opened an office in India. We've got one that's just been opened in the US as well. So yeah, it's all full steam ahead, but essentially all run by dedicated volunteers.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great when you can kind of, people buy into your idea, and of course when they're volunteering, it's even more kind of amazing that they're doing that. So yeah. And are you looking for volunteers at the moment, or are you always looking for volunteers?
We're always looking for volunteers. I think we've got large ambitions, so having people with expertise being able to commit some of their time to the work that we do is really important. So across the board, from marketing, social media,
Sure.
to sometimes going out with us to projects in India, training up as a Binti menstrual trainer, for example. It's kind
Oh,
of a life-changing experience to actually go out to a foreign country and teach girls about menstruation.
yeah, I can
Because the
imagine.
funny thing is, once you've taught someone, you can't unlearn what you know. So you actually make an impact to that girl's life and for generations to come. So it really is quite rewarding.
Yeah, and it's kind of
For
an
them.
all-round circle, kind of relating to it as well. Kind of obviously being female, you can kind of empowering someone of that age, and giving them a different outlook on what I suppose, what they're being surrounded with, constant kind of negative ideas around your period, and kind of being a woman. So it must be great having someone coming in and saying, actually, no, that's completely not the way to look at it.
But I think it's also an impact on the volunteer as well, because you
Yeah.
really do get a sense of other people's lives and how they live it. And actually, you learn a lot just by training in that environment yourself and hearing their stories and how they deal with things.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, would you say, I don't know how to suppose phrase this question, but do you ever get any sort of backlash or negative kind of comments when you go into the like different countries and go into a village? Does anyone kind of come to you and say you shouldn't be doing this or anything?
Not really. I think in the beginning, I remember because I was so angry and I had to make a change. And I was, I suppose, really focused on the information that I felt needed to be put out there. I wasn't really listening to other people's opinions and ideas, and everybody's on their own journey. So, yeah, I would say that there hasn't been many occasions when it has come up as someone completely against the work that we're doing, because sometimes they think that menstruation should be a secret, private topic.
Yeah, yeah.
But really, you do have to open your eyes and realize that it's not just about your own experience, it's about other people's.
Yeah, of course.
If everything's fine in your world doesn't mean it's fine in anyone else's world.
No, completely.
Approaching it differently and not being, from my perspective, I've learned not to be so single-minded, but at the same time I have to be, otherwise I'll know. I'm talking about one of the greatest taboos in society, right? So I have to be quite determined and forthright. And I would say that I've been on the other end of the fence where, yes, I grew up in a very conservative family, and menstruation was definitely not one of those topics that was openly discussed. And in fact, I remember having to hide my underwear under a towel if it was washed. So I kind of really get a good understanding of why this stigma exists in India, for example, or anywhere else in the world.
And I think also, like much of these topics, like it's great kind of, I mean, when I started looking at Girls In, I mean, the long-term goal is obviously helping communities in India and places like Africa. But when you start looking a bit closer to home, you actually realize that there's actually kind of bigger issues within the UK as well. And the sort of stigma around this topic must be something in the UK that you've come across, like not just with obviously homeless people not having access, but in different cultures there must be so many conversations which are not being had within households about kind of menstrual. Do you do work in the UK as well?
We do, and if you just think for a moment about advertising, why is it that they use blue liquid when they highlight the absorbent sanitary product? I mean, we're kind of perpetuating this secrecy and silence from a very young age, where girls are taught, hey, let's make this liquid that comes out of us look as if it's blue, so that we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We're told
it's so
that,
true, actually. It's just, yeah. I mean, I watched an advert the other day and I was like, that's not how it is. It's not blue, but it goes over your head because you're like, oh, it's just advertising and that's the way it is. But actually, if we can't even do it in advertising, then how are people, when looking at it at home, going to think that, oh, it's okay to kind of talk about and stuff like that?
we've been campaigning for that for the last 2 years, and we have kind of made headway with that.
Great.
Body now just released this was about a month ago, an advert where they have got red liquid showing. But really, it's one of those things where we know that this menstrual shame exists in our world just as much as it exists in developing nations. So it's a problem that half of the women around the world face, half of the population around the world face, and there's no point being in denial that it doesn't exist, because clearly it does.
Yeah, of course. No, definitely. I mean, when I read more up about Binti and what it's trying to do, it sounds like it's definitely a challenge which you're facing kind of every day. I mean, what would be your biggest highlight of this year when it comes to Binti, would you say?
There's just so many, really, to be honest. I think the one that I enjoy the most is actually on the ground and speaking to the girls and watching their face light up when they suddenly realise what that niggling pain in their back every month is. So really, those are the big ones for us. But I guess some of the others could be, we've won a couple of awards this year. When we get an organization send us a check and we've never spoken to them before, it means our social media or our marketing campaign is working really well. That's really always nice. Getting some fantastic volunteers to help and make an impact. The team spirit that we have is phenomenal. Yeah, it's a combination. I mean, I love doing what I'm doing, and it always makes me giggle because here I am traveling the world talking about periods. And I remember when I was younger, I always wanted to have a really sexy product that I could sell. Well, it doesn't get any sexier than bloody periods, I guess. So,
Yeah, no. I mean, let's talk about the startup world for yourself. I mean, when I read a kind of bit of background on you, and it's mentioned that you've been involved in 7 startups. I mean, is that stat right? I mean, is it more than that? And what's your experience around the startup world?
well, I was one of those salespeople that grew up in an era where I was given a telephone, telephone book. I don't even know if anybody knows what one of them is, but like a Yellow Pages directory and
Yeah,
a telephone, and I knew what I was selling, and then I had to go and find organizations to sell to. So I started from a very basic uh, way of communicating, and probably had people tell me no a million times
yeah, that
throughout.
rejection. I've been there.
Yeah, so it's been startup of sales departments with different organizations. One of my most exciting jobs was this American company who hired me to start their sales division in the UK.
Yeah.
And at the time, this is going to sound really crazy, but they were selling a fax technology service.
Oh wow.
So when you would stand by the fax machine trying to send a document and the paper would be run out at the other end, or it was busy, well, this technology service would allow you to send the fax the first time, and then the fax would arrive at this organization's server, and it was their job that it arrived at the final destination. That was groundbreaking
Yeah, I
technology,
was
and that
gonna
was,
say for the time it was probably groundbreaking.
yeah, that was 98 actually. So
Wow.
yeah, it was interesting.
Amazing. And at the moment, are you involved in any startups? I mean, what do you do outside of Binti?
Outside of Binti, I guess I sleep and eat. That's about it.
Love it. I suppose, I mean, obviously, you've kind of gone and kind of mentored young girls across the world. What's the sort of, in your eyes, what's the importance of mentoring girls in this day and age?
Well, I would say that throughout my own personal career, I've always had a mentor, and it's important to have people that you can learn from, or that you can look up to, or that you aspire to be like, because it really does help you to build the skill that you need
Yeah,
moving
completely.
forward. And sometimes, as a mentor, you know yourself that we have the answers, but sometimes we just need someone to help us
Yeah.
extract them. Everyone has their own answer already.
Hmm.
It's just a mirror placed in front of you to help you work it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, definitely. It's definitely an important thing. I mean, with 2018 just around the corner, and what's exciting that's coming up for Binti? Are there any kind of events or key kind of stuff in the calendar for you guys?
We have a number of things going on. So we are launching an app.
Oh, wow,
We
cool.
have a recycled product that's coming out. Yeah, there's. I think it's kind of a funny one, because if I reflect back on the year, there's always something massive every month, and if I'm having a bad day, it suddenly turns into a fantastic day because something crazy will happen. It's just the way that it is, and I guess if I was to talk to somebody who is starting their own startup, once you're in the what's the right word? Once you're in the zone and you've started on something, you'll find that the universe has a great way of doors that just keep opening.
Yeah. I think what I always tell myself at the start world is just, I mean, you'll have more downs than ups, but when you have the ups, you've really got to appreciate it, and that will carry you through for like the next month or 2 months. So, yeah, I mean, when you, like you say, if you're having a bad day, even like looking back on the positives that have happened in that week or in that day, they really do lift you, and then suddenly new doors open. It's a great feeling. So, just on a kind of final question, if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
It's an interesting one, because I think people around me will always tell me to slow down. I kind of go at a pace that's quite fast. If I was to reflect back on my younger self, I guess the younger self would just be told to have more faith in what she's doing, and to I don't know if I'm doing anything different to when I was younger. And I guess the only thing is that it sounds extraordinary, but when I was younger, I just did it without thinking.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking a little bit more than I did when I was younger. It hasn't really slowed me down much, but I don't know. I guess also just this, it's just this having the self-belief, that would be it.
Yeah.
When we're younger, we don't always necessarily believe that we can do anything, and sometimes answers come at a different stage in your life because you're ready to hear them at a different point. So it's just knowing that everything's fine,
Yeah.
everything's going to work out.
Yeah, I think when you're younger, you definitely need to tell yourself more that it's all going to work out. And I think that fear factor is always there when you're younger, and kind of what's the future? If I make this decision, what's going to happen? I think when you come from a world of startup, every day is like, oh my god, if I do this, what's going to happen? But yeah, no, that's definitely some good advice to put out there. Well, thank you so much, Manjit. I mean, it's an amazing journey that you've had with Binti, and I think you guys are early in what you're doing in terms of kind of, is it 3 years young that you are 3.5 years, is that right? um
Yes.
yeah, and I feel like you've achieved so much already, so I'm really kind of backing that even in the next 1 year, 5 years, you guys are going to do great things. So good luck with everything. And I think with the volunteering, if anyone's interested, I'll put the details at the bottom of the YouTube, so reach out to Manjit and her team, because I definitely think it's a project worth getting involved in. So thank you, Manjit, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Polly, and good luck with your venture too.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks everyone. Of course, we're live on iTunes now, so you can download this podcast. And thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.
So